Hello. Welcome to another one of our little chats. I hope it will give you some interesting things to think about for a little while. I was asked to talk a little bit more about some aspects of good coexistence. And for that, I've picked out a few virtues. Of course, you might say, well, I could name several other virtues besides these. I could tell you that practically all virtues are good for getting along well. I had to think of only a few that I considered vital. And you might think that I missed one or another, but it also highlights the fact that one virtue sometimes leads to another. For example, empathy is very much present in respect. Virtues pull each other along. They get interconnected out of necessity. So we're going to talk specifically about diversity, openness, affection, and respect. These four virtues, how they contribute to good coexistence, not just with other people, as we might think, but also with the world around us. Because this kind of coexistence is also extremely necessary. Often, being quite egocentric as humans, we think that getting along well is just among people. That would already be exceptional. But we also have to coexist with nature as a whole, with the planet, with everything around us. That's also part of good coexistence. So these four virtues are really useful for us to get along well. So we'll start by talking about respect. Recently, I've talked a lot about this virtue, but to recap some fundamental things, respect comes from respiceere, to look again, to know how to see, to look with attention. Respect is about considering, paying attention, giving special consideration to something or someone, and that means pausing my stress, my rush, to see something, slowing down my thoughts, to notice, to feel something. Therefore, respect is closely tied to another important virtue. Because only if we stop and focus on things can we develop empathy with them. And empathy is one aspect, then, that we can consider within respect. So I stop and I see you. I was telling you about a time when I didn't have any change to give to a boy who was taking care of my car in the parking lot. I looked at him closely and said, "Son, today I don't have any." And he walked away so cheerfully that I got the impression that the way I treated him, by looking at him and acknowledging his existence for a minute or two, it might have been more meaningful to him than the actual money I could have give. Because he's probably not used to being treated that way. We don't pay attention to each other. And it's not just to the person watching our car in the parking lot. Sometimes, inside our own homes, we're talking to each other while looking at something else, checking our phones, going over the day's routine. We don't actually give each other any quality attention. And respect is about that. I respect you when I see you. I respect you when I pause and take the time to notice you. And that will then generate empathy. Empathy, as we've already talked about, is the ability to see people through their psychological framework, the ability to put yourself in the world they're in. And when we understand someone else's world, we can help them from the point where they are. When we don't understand someone else's world, we try to force them according to parameters from our own world, according to our personal values, according to things they don't understand. Maybe he understands a lot more about other things than I do, but we don't match up at the same points of maturity. Human beings rarely agree on everything. So he has a context, a world, with his worldview, with his background, with everything he perceives as right, as fair, as good, and also as difficult, as impossible, as insurmountable. By understanding this world, we can help him take another step. By understanding this world, we can move it forward. Without getting into someone else's context, it's hard to really help them. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, for example, to be in front of someone who doesn't have much time left. And this person has a religious belief that doesn't match yours at all, or maybe you're quite distant from those beliefs. But at that moment, with that person who doesn't have much time left, you're not going to try to convert them to something else. You are going to try to help them using the elements they have, reinforcing the beliefs they hold, reinforcing their worldview, because it's no longer the time for any changes. Now what's needed is trust, faith, security, and peace. It's not the time to change values anymore. This is a critical moment that highlights the importance of developing empathy. But it was so necessary, just like in this moment and many other challenges in life. Knowing how to step into someone else's values and help them think from what they're seeing so they can take the next step, so they can be worth it. If we don't have empathy, we have little chance of helping each other. In other words, respect is when you consider someone worthy enough to stop everything and give them your full attention. That's what respect makes us do. And empathy makes us let go of all the circumstances of our own world, which we're so used to thinking are the only truths, to step into someone else's world and think from their perspective and help them take the next step. So, it's a fundamental element in getting along, and it creates exchange. It's really interesting because with empathy, you're not just teaching the other person, you're also learning. A lot of their worldview might be more accurate than yours. A lot of their worldview can help you see things more broadly. So you give what you're seeing and get something back. It's not just an unequal relationship where I give something and get nothing in return. No. These are horizontal relationships where I give something and also have a lot to learn. And through empathy, we make an exchange and both of us grow. It's a fundamental element for healthy coexistence. We have to practice, we have to learn. And for that, once again, and we're going to talk about this several times in the lecture, we have to stop thinking that we own the truth. In other words, the way I see the world is unique and absolute. Everything I think is right. So I don't have to understand the other person's world. I have to force my world into theirs. Of course, that's never going to work, and that's definitely not true. Show me a human being in this world whose values, whose worldview, whose every consideration about life is 100% correct. I'll point you to a being that's probably not from this world, because everyone here has their rights and wrongs, has things to teach and things to learn. So this is a fundamental element to be considered. Regarding this, I brought you a piece of a song that I find really beautiful, a song by Shikobu Arke called Male no Murado. There's a part of the song. Check out how interesting it is. It says exactly what empathy is proposing. I see my beloved with her eyes, and it's with my eyes that my beloved sees me. Look how beautiful I see my love through his eyes, and it's through my eyes that my love sees me. In other words, through love, a person cares about seeing things from the other person's perspective to understand them better. This little piece of the song, this beautiful melody, this snippet of the lyrics, it is very enlightening about what empathy really is. Moving on, let's talk about diversity. I've brought you two images here. One is Michelangelo's creation of Adam with its original colors, beautifully and specially colored. And on the other side, Michelangelo's creation of Adam, but only in shades of blue. It's all blue. It's obvious that we recognize the beauty of the forms, the creativity and inventiveness of the painting's composition, but the beauty is, largely, I'd say, almost completely lost. And I put these two images here so you could notice this secret of life. Beauty is created in the harmony of differences. If everything in the world were the same, there wouldn't be any beauty. Just one musical note, and we wouldn't have any beautiful melody. Just one color, and we wouldn't have any beautiful painting, any beautiful landscape. Nothing would be beautiful in the world if there wasn't harmony among differences. That's a secret of nature. That's how it creates beauty. This beauty is so essential to elevate our consciousness and take us further. Diversity, then, as we realize from this observation, enriches the whole. The whole takes on shades we couldn't imagine if everything were the same. It is a law of nature. When we look at a tree, it seems like an indistinct mass. But if you pick two leaves, you won't find two identical ones. Everything you look at around you is a combination, a harmonization of differences. And these differences greatly enrich the whole. But it also enriches the part. Diversity enriches the whole and also enriches the parts. Because each one, as we just talked about with empathy, by learning from what's different, enriches their own point of view. When I harmonize with what's different, I learn a different way of seeing life, which enriches me and gives me a broader perspective, a wider field of consciousness. That's what it's all about. Don't forget. We came into the world to elevate our consciousness, to see life in a broader and higher way. The smart combination of differences makes it so that one's qualities help develop the qualities of the other. And the flaws of one can be corrected by the other and vice versa, because we don't match in qualities and flaws. So we help each other in both ways to correct one another and to teach one another. So diversity enriches the whole and also enriches each part. That makes up this big puzzle. We need to have a learner's spirit, like we just talked about. The learner's spirit is essential for coexistence in general. Don't feel like you own the truth. Just like we talked about empathy, this is equally necessary. Diversity, when we think we own the truth, bothers us because I'm right and a bunch of people are wrong, because anyone who's different from me necessarily must be wrong. In other words, either you're with me or against me. You don't accept differences because you think your point of view is perfect. Socrates used to say, or so the story goes, that if someone says, "I found the truth," there are two possibilities. The first possibility is that they really have found it and they're a wise person who shouldn't even be in this world anymore. The second possibility is that they don't even know what the truth is and they're ignorant. In neither case is he fit to be a philosopher who is someone that loves wisdom and is always seeking with a spirit of improvement day after day. So be very careful with that. We're not the owners of the truth. And with that in mind, we can get along really well with diversity, with a learner's spirit, considering that the new always brings us something different. I've been a teacher for many years, and over these decades of teaching, I find it really interesting that when a student in the classroom, not trying to provoke or show off, but honestly brings a different point of view, it starts to enrich the class with a totally different vibe. Because maybe I wouldn't have thought to illustrate from that perspective he brought to me. The class takes on a different vibe when someone with good intentions, not trying to provoke or show off, but with good intentions, brings a different point of view. That brings new shades, new angles from which we can look at the same fact we're examining. And it definitely enriches the class. That's how it works. Whoever wants to grow loves diversity. Anyone who thinks they've grown as much as they can rejects diversity. This second point of view is a false one by definition. Another important element is fighting complacency, because complacency is what also makes us not want to change our point of view. We don't want to change our point of view for two reasons, either because we think it's perfect or because we're too complacent and don't want to mess with anything. So imagine you're at work. You got a way of doing things that you've been doing for years, and it's so repetitive that you've got it all memorized. There's not much effort in carrying out your routine. Then someone different comes in with other points of view, with a different attitude towards life, and that's going to be a lot of work for you because you'll have to update the way you do things based on the new perspective this person brings. So I reject diversity also out of complacency. Not just because I feel like I own the truth, but also because I don't want to know the truth. I just want to keep doing things the way I do. I don't want any hassles. I don't want to change, which is one of the worst things that can happen to a human being. Considering that none of us have reached the peak of human condition, we're all here to grow. Life is simply a journey from ignorance to wisdom. We're here to grow. Not wanting to change anything is extremely negative. It means you've parked in the middle of the road. Maybe not even in the middle, maybe right at the beginning. With so much still to go, you decided to park. And doesn't want to see anything else. It's amazing. It's like someone being in the middle of a beautiful park and locking themselves in a booth, maybe in the restroom, and staying locked in there, thinking they've seen enough and don't want to see anything else. So, complacency is also a factor that makes us reject diversity. Another element that really hinders diversity is personalism and competitiveness. In other words, if there are different points of view, I want mine to prevail. It doesn't matter if it's more true or less true, but it's mine and I want it to prevail. I want to come in first place. So, if there are people who think differently from me, those people are my enemies. Why? Because I want my point of view to prevail. It's a bit different from someone who thinks they own the truth. And someone who thinks they own the truth at least wants the truth to prevail. The vain person knows they don't have the truth, that they have a version on the same level as all the others, but they want their version to prevail because they want to highlight their personality. He's extremely competitive. He doesn't allow for compromise. Points of view so that a group can grow together. He's not used to winning together. Many times in my talks, I've told you this, that we have an idea of success over others. Winning over, not winning together. He's not ready to win together with the team. He wants to win alone over everyone else. In other words, for his victory to taste sweet, there have to be several failures, because that's how he feels special. So this competitive person is always going to be looking sideways at any difference, at any diversity. Because he wants to prove to someone, not to himself, because he knows his point of view isn't the best. And he doesn't even care to know which one is the best. But he wants to prove to someone who's evaluating the process that his point of view is the best. Because he wants to stand out. He wants to come in first place. And the truth doesn't matter to him. He might not even believe that the truth exists. He just wants to highlight his personality. One thing we can't ignore is that rejection of diversity brings a big dose of cruelty. It's heavy. It's like what the Hindus say, it's bad karma. Why? Rejecting diversity means you're going to judge someone from birth. Wants to judge them as inferior, wants to judge them as superior. In the case of judging him as inferior, when he hasn't even made a single move, he's still a newborn baby, and he's already considered inferior because of some characteristic. That's a tremendous cruelty. Judging someone as superior because of some characteristic is a tremendous injustice. So it's negative both for those you favor and for those you discriminate against. Ultimately, not knowing how to live with diversity carries a big dose of cruelty, meaning something that tremendously contaminates our soul, that poisons us, because cruelty is a poison for the human soul, since we find fulfillment in goodness, in benevolence, in the idea of good, in kindness. So, it's a dangerous, complicated flaw. That we have to be very careful with it. Admitting to being cruel to certain human beings, when we are perfectly aware that we're being cruel, is a serious character flaw, and sometimes it's hard to reverse. Another important element, openness. Openness is a virtue that might seem strange. What is openness? Openness is being open to the new. Being open to the new requires a learner's spirit, curiosity. Being open to the new is about being receptive, not just to others who bring something new, but to life itself that brings something new. This also has to do with living with nature, with life, in the way I mentioned to you at the beginning. In other words, openness requires a learner's spirit, curiosity, wanting to know what's coming up. It's that person who's eager to grow, who wants to push their boundaries further, who doesn't accept dying the same size they were born. They want to be a factor of addition. They want to leave here bigger than when they came in. They want to make a difference. This person, they're open, they're flexible, they're adaptable. And this is one of the virtues we need the most in today's world. It's a world where the flow of information is increasing and at an ever-growing speed. Being adaptable is something that's highly valued today, for example, in the job market. Don't adapt to flaws, to bad habits, but adapt to new needs to keep growing. We're not going to adapt to what's dark, what's bad. That's not what it's about, but adapt to new needs so we can keep growing. So, a person who is open flows along with life. She has this ability to accept the new proposals that life brings, that another human being brings, and from there, expand her point of view. She doesn't shut down in the face of the new. She doesn't shut down in the face of things, like we talked about earlier in cognitism, that will break her routine. She has a vital curiosity to know what things are, to get closer to the truth. So, she's very open and very flexible when it comes to anything that's proposed as something new. Even if life throws something at her that might not be very pleasant, she has trust in life, the open person. They inherently have a trust in life, in the sense that she believes everything life brings can teach something positive, something good that will make her grow. She doesn't believe there's any absolute in the manifested world. Things are relative. So, something that seems bad to me necessarily has a good side. Something that seems unpleasant to me necessarily has a side that makes me grow. So she looks at the new with this vital curiosity, knowing that whatever new thing life presents will always bring us opportunities for growth. The new things that others bring to me will always offer an opportunity to explore different alternatives. Not that I'll necessarily accept them, but I'll get to know them, I'll find out what they're about. And my consciousness expands as much when I accept the new as when I reject it. When it's not suitable, when it's not relevant. Both by accepting and rejecting, my consciousness expands. These are new realities I've come into contact with. Another thing that's really important when it comes to being open is having an identity that's flexible. There are people, and quite a few of them, who say that to feel secure, to feel safe, they need to feel solid ground under their feet. That's tricky because the world is in flux. The world is eternally in flux, and man himself is in flux. He can't stay stuck with the same level of consciousness his whole life. That's not natural, it's not part of human nature. Buckminster Fuller, who was a great American inventor, used to say that man is a flow, a process, moving through the milestones of life. It flows through the milestones of life. Man is a flow, a process. So, our security can't be a solid ground under our feet. Our security can't be in being static. Our security is in movement. That's how a philosopher is. What does philosopher mean? Love of wisdom. The philosopher feels secure when he's chasing after wisdom. And this flow, this movement, gives him the feeling of security. That he's doing what he's meant to do in the world. So, be careful with that kind of security that demands we be buried in the ground, stuck in the ground. It's a morbid kind of security that doesn't let us grow. Learn to be secure in the flow, in the movement, going with the flow of life. And besides, we can't forget to say that a person who's open-minded is incredibly creative. Because she's able to take that new thing life brings and create something that's an improvement on everything that came before. It's like a good cook who makes great dishes with the ingredients and spices she has. Suddenly, you take a trip abroad and bring back an exotic spice for her. She'll try it out, see what it goes with, and create a dish even more delicious than anything she's made before. If she truly loves the art of cooking and wants to create better and better things, she's not stuck in her ways, she's open to new possibilities. This will make her create even better things. In other words, a person who's open-minded is a creative person. The conservative usually isn't creative. Of course, we need to have a bit of conservation for essential things, but we also need to have a bit of progress, of expansion towards constantly broadening and elevating our consciousness, which is the ultimate purpose of life. And lastly, let's talk about affection. Why is affection so important? That's almost obvious, right? The emotional connections we establish with the world, why are they so important for getting along? First, we have to consider that expressing affection everywhere we are, creating emotional bonds not just with people, but with things, with objects. Creating bonds is fundamental. It's interesting how sometimes we use an object, we're like predators today. We use an object so poorly that it lasts only half of its normal lifespan. Disregard for the things that serve us. Disregard for those things that are part of our world and have been part of our lives for a while. It's a level of indifference, a terrible level of selfishness. We should be able to, and I suggest you try this exercise, one day leave the house looking to create emotional bonds with everything around you, with the path you take to work, with the people moving around in the best way they can, going to their jobs, taking their kids to school, living their daily lives. The affection for that spot where you park, which is the place where you can safely leave your car. The affection for the people who travel with you to that place. To all the objects that serve you at your workplace, your work materials, your tools. And also, obviously, with all the people you cross paths with along the way. Creating emotional bonds makes our relationships much smoother, makes us much more careful, much more prudent, in the sense of giving each one what they deserve, which is justice, according to Plato. In other words, treat things in the best way possible. Of course, creating bonds of affection doesn't mean we stop being prudent and understanding. Prudence and understanding are tools of emotional bonds. Why? When establishing an emotional bond with someone, if I don't know them well yet, I'll have a level of prudence and a level of seeking knowledge, of observation. To see how far I can deepen these emotional bonds, how far a mutual trust relationship can be created. Therefore, these conditions of prudence and observation don't exclude emotional bonds, nor do they come before them. If I try to be prudent and examine things first, before giving my heart, maybe I'll never find anything or anyone worthy. When, in reality, we're in a world where everything and everyone is worthy, because we're all part of the whole, without exception. It can't just be me or that. It's me, that, those, all things, all at the same time within the unity. So when we create a bond of affection, we have a much greater chance of understanding things deeply. You notice when you're treated with affection, you open your heart and show yourself to the other person. That's how it is. All these things, when treated with affection, open up and reveal themselves. And then understanding becomes much deeper, observation becomes much more effective, and prudence can be exercised in the best way possible. So don't wait. First I'll observe, then I'll create emotional bonds. No. First, I create emotional bonds. Then I'll observe on what basis these emotional bonds need to be established. What level of trust, what level of treatment, what level of... All the elements of coexistence will have to be established to benefit this person, this object, this circumstance. But first, I open my heart. It's a phrase I've often used with you all, which is from an Eastern thinker, Nilakanta Sri Ram. You should lose your heart every day, and then go after it. And that way, you'll discover that your heart is the heart of all things. Leave every step you've climbed in life with the stamp of your heart. I came through here with an open heart. Creating emotional bonds is essential for us to be with each other, considering all the needs we've talked about before. Respect, diversity, empathy, everything we talked about before, openness. So it's an important element to consider. We have to learn to feel life and not just rationalize it. I look out my window in the morning. It's sunny. It's cloudy. Today will be hot. It'll be cold. The transportation I take today will be slower or faster. Traffic will be more fluid or less fluid. That's a technical variation of life, without any affection. We have to learn to have an emotional relationship with life to understand it more deeply, to unite heart to heart with it. Because a lot of knowledge comes from that too. A lot of knowledge doesn't just come from the mind. A lot of knowledge comes from the heart. When we feel life, we open our window and say, "Thank you for another day." What an exceptional, complex, and beautiful thing life is. How good it is to be with it. How good it is to have the chance to savor it once more. How great it is to have another opportunity open up, and your heart feels in a state of grace, because once again, you're going to walk alongside life. And it has a lot to teach you. It has a lot to show you. So you go with the spirit of a learner. You go with affection for an opportunity that's being given. Don't wait to appreciate life only when it becomes scarce. Appreciate life while it still seems abundant to you. It's never that much, right? But while it still seems abundant to you, feel life. Have an affectionate relationship with it. Don't just rationalize life. That holds you back from a lot of learning. We can say that a big part, if not most, of our learning about people, the things around us, and nature as a whole is done through the heart more than through the mind. So we become technical, closed off, and narrow-minded when we just rationalize things, when we don't create emotional bonds with things. Like we've already said, affection opens doors, because when we treat things with affection, they open up and show their heart. And it also generates compassion, which is one of the most refined things we have. One day, I'll give a talk just about compassion. Compassion isn't pity. It's not feeling like something is beneath you. Compassion is when you notice the depth of someone else's pain, even if they seem to be doing just fine. And have empathy for that pain, and try in some way to understand it to minimize it. I have my own pains too. I don't feel superior to him. I just feel that my fulfillment comes from trying to minimize the pain of everyone around me. And for that, I want to understand a bit of the world's pains. I want to understand them and try to help soothe them. That's a genuine feeling of giving, of surrender. True compassion is pure giving. I give myself to the world to try to make it better, to try to ease its pains, to try to bring a bit more harmony, because I owe that to the world, since it gave me everything. I owe that to life, since it gave me everything. So, we realize that emotional bonds are essential to generate this inexhaustible source of energy, which is giving, which is compassion. And only then do we truly benefit the world. Affection involves commitment. And sometimes we're scared of that, and we don't want to create emotional bonds because we don't want to commit to anything. Very similar to that complacency we saw just a little while ago. Remember the fox from The Little Prince. You become eternally responsible for what you tame. And really, when we create emotional bonds, we have a level of responsibility for the things connected to us. And this level of responsibility makes us grow. Since I made a commitment, I have to be worthy of it. I have to be worthy of honoring it, and so I grow. If I don't commit to anything, the size I am is just fine. But if I commit, I now have to grow to be able to honor all my emotional bonds. The more beings fit in my heart, the bigger my heart will have to be to accommodate them with all the comfort they deserve. So, my heart will expand if I create emotional bonds. If I don't create them, it stays tiny, mediocre, focused on personal things and nothing else. So, it's crucial how this emotional relationship with the world makes you expand, makes you grow, makes you become more responsible, take the reins of life in your hands, have initiative, have the desire to be better than you were yesterday. And that's fundamental. And it's the first step, creating emotional bonds. It's the first step to having deep connections. I established a bond. It's a bridge through which this connection can deepen more and more. Deep bonds are some of the best things we build throughout our lives. When we're facing death and we think about the things that truly mattered, which aren't that many, we'll remember those moments when we were heart to heart with someone. To the point of having a deep friendship, a deep love, where there was an exchange of the best each person had to offer and help with the difficulties each one faced. This bond that brings us so close, heart to heart, is called concord. Concord is exactly heart to heart. These emotional bonds are so well built that we feel like not even death can take them away from us. And that's fundamental for our growth. That's one of the real things we build in life. If you stop to think about it, the real things we build in life, the values we acquire, how much we benefit the world, how many true relationships we can establish. There are few things, not that many, but they are the fundamental ones, the ones that will be worth it in the decisive moment. When all the distractions fall away in the face of death, all the distractions crumble, we'll realize that these are the few things that truly mattered. So, enrich yourself with things of true value. Creating emotional bonds, having affection, will create deep connections, concord, real unions that nothing and no one can break. And finally, we can say, regarding all of this, that these virtues we talked about are tools we use to get closer and closer to a fully human condition, to reach the root of all true peace and all true happiness. In other words, the fully human condition is being built, sculpted by us, like that image of the self-made man, the man building himself. We're still on our way to becoming fully human beings. We're still on our way to completing ourselves, to achieving the dignity that the human condition demands. So, this requires building, and virtues are the tools that help us in this building process. Without virtues, we won't be able to reach our destination, our ideal, which is the fully human condition, which is fair and dignified, something we all aspire to. And let's be worthy of what nature entrusted to us, believing we could achieve, which is the building of ourselves as true human beings. So, don't forget to conquer and practice these tools, which are the virtues. And that's what I had for a little chat with you all today. I ask you to reflect on each of these things and see how these and other virtues are amazing in our process of self-transformation, of refining what we have. The best, excluding all the things that just pollute, just contaminate, just weigh us down and tie us to the ground. Thank you all so much, and a big hug.